I am Mason, 32 years old, and last winter, my own parents threw me and my 3-week-old son out into a snowstorm because they wanted my bedroom for a game room. Before I tell you about the moment a Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled up and changed the power dynamic forever, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one of them. It started with the smell of cheap cologne and stale pizza. That was the scent of my brother, Ethan. He was 28 years old, perfectly healthy, and yet he occupied the living room of my parents' house like a king on a throne made of cushions. I was in the kitchen warming up a bottle for Leo. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from exhaustion. Leo hadn't slept in 2 days, and neither had I. My wife, Sarah, had passed away during childbirth less than a month ago. The grief was a physical weight, like carrying a wet wool coat that I couldn't take off. I was staying in the small guest room on the first floor. It was temporary. I had told my parents, Richard and Patricia, that I just needed a place to get my bearings while I sorted out my finances. They assumed sorting out finances meant I was broke. They assumed I was looking for a handout. They couldn't have been more wrong, but I didn't correct them. I wanted to see if they would support me because I was their son, not because of what I had in the bank. Mason! My mother's voice screeched from the living room. It wasn't a call. It was a summons. I capped the bottle and walked into the living room. My mother was sitting on the recliner, filing her nails. My father was watching football, a beer balanced on his stomach. Ethan was pacing, looking agitated. "What is it, Mom?" "Leo is about to wake up," I said, keeping my voice low. "That's exactly the problem," Ethan snapped. He pointed a finger at me. "The crying is constant. How am I supposed to stream with that noise? My followers are complaining. I lost 3 subscribers yesterday because your brat started wailing right in the middle of my commentary." I looked at him, incredulous. "Ethan, he's a newborn. He lost his mother. He's crying because he's confused and hungry. I don't care why he's doing it," my father grunted, not looking away from the TV. "It's annoying, and it's disrupting Ethan's career." Career? I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. "Dad, he plays video games in his underwear. He's 28. When I was his age, I stopped myself. I almost said I was already consulting for Fortune 500 companies. But I held back. I was working. "Don't you dare talk down to your brother," my mother said, finally looking up. Her eyes were cold, devoid of any maternal warmth. "Ethan is a creative. He has potential. Unlike you. Look at you, Mason. 32, widowed, and back living with mommy and daddy. It's pathetic." The word hung in the air. Pathetic. "I pay for the groceries," I said quietly. "I pay for the utilities. I'm not asking for money. I just need a roof over our heads for a few weeks until the closing." Again I stopped. They didn't know about the house I was buying. A sprawling estate in the hills. "Until I find a place." "Well, time's up," Ethan said, a smug grin spreading across his face. "I need that guest room. The lighting in the basement is terrible for my stream. I need the natural light from the first floor." Mom and Dad agreed. "I'm moving my setup upstairs tonight." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Tonight? Where am I supposed to go? It's 10 degrees outside. It's snowing. My father finally sat up. He took a swig of his beer and burped. "That sounds like a you problem, Mason. We've been patient. But you're cramping our style. And frankly, having a crying baby around is depressing. Kills the vibe." "He is your grandson," I whispered. My voice broke. "He is your flesh and blood." "He's a burden," my mother corrected, standing up. She smoothed her skirt. "And so are you. We've discussed it. We want you out. Now." I stood there, frozen. I looked at the photos on the mantle. Pictures of Ethan graduating high school. Pictures of Ethan winning a participation trophy in soccer. There were no pictures of me. Not my college graduation, not my wedding. I had always been the invisible son, the one who didn't need help, so I didn't get love. "You can't be serious," I said. "You can't legally just kick me out without notice." My father laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Legally? You want to talk lawyers with me? I work for Sterling Enterprises. Boy, I know how the world works. You don't have a lease. You're a guest. And guests can be asked to leave. I'm not leaving tonight, I said firmly. I will leave tomorrow morning when I can find a hotel. But I am not taking a 3-week-old baby out into a blizzard. My father stood up. He was a big man, heavy-set, with a face that turned red when he was angry. He walked over to me, towering over my frame. You don't tell me what to do in my house. He grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. Get your things, he hissed. Dad, let go, I said, pulling back. You're going to wake Leo. As if on cue, a wail erupted from the guest room. Leo had woken up. See, Ethan yelled, throwing his hands up. There it goes again. I can't work like this. My mother marched past me into the guest room. I heard the sound of rustling, and then the sound of fabric tearing. I ran in after her. She was shoving my clothes, Leo's diapers, and his blankets into a black garbage bag. She wasn't packing. She was purging. Stop it, I yelled, grabbing the bag from her. What is wrong with you people? We are taking back our life, she screamed back. Her face was twisted in a snarl. We raised you. We did our job. We deserve peace in our retirement. We don't deserve this. This mess you brought home. She pointed at the crib where Leo was screaming, his face turning red. I scooped him up, holding him tight to my chest. He smelled like baby powder and milk, the only innocent thing in this house of horrors. He is not a mess. He is my son. He's noisy baggage, my father said from the doorway. He was holding my winter coat. He threw it at me. It hit me in the face, the zipper scratching my cheek. Put it on. You're leaving. I have nowhere to go, I pleaded, my pride breaking for the sake of my son. Please, just one night. Let me sleep on the floor. I'll keep him quiet. Please. I looked at my mother. I looked for a shred of the woman who had once bandaged my knees when I fell off my bike. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone obsessed with status and her golden child, Ethan. No, she said. The word was final. Ethan has a sponsorship deal pending. He needs the room ready by morning. Prioritize Mason. Success matters. Success. That was their god. They worshipped the appearance of wealth, the appearance of status. They had no idea that the man standing in front of them, wearing sweatpants and holding a crying baby, had a net worth 10 times higher than their beloved boss. Fine, I said. My voice was suddenly calm. It was the calm of a bridge burning down. I'll go. I managed to grab my laptop bag, my lifeline, and stuffed a few diapers into my pockets. I wrapped Leo in his thickest blanket and buttoned him inside my own coat, creating a kangaroo pouch to shield him from the wind. My father grabbed my shoulder and shoved me toward the front door. Move! I stumbled, barely keeping my balance. If I had fallen, if I had crushed Leo. The thought sent a surge of adrenaline through me. I turned to look at them one last time. They stood in the hallway, a united front of cruelty. Ethan was leaning against the wall, smirking, already texting on his phone, probably updating his status about finally getting his studio space. My mother had her arms crossed, a look of righteous indignation on her face. My father looked like he had just taken out the trash. You'll regret this, I said. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. My mother spat. Go live in the trash where you belong, Mason. Maybe you'll find a wife there who won't die on you. That was it. The line that severed the last thread. My father opened the door. The wind howled, sending a spray of snow into the hallway. It was bitter, biting cold. Get out, he roared, and with a final shove, he pushed me onto the porch. The door slammed shut. I heard the deadbolt click. Then the chain lock. I stood there for a moment, staring at the wood grain of the door. The house was warm. The windows glowed with yellow light. Inside, they were probably high-fiving. Inside, they were warm. Outside, the world was white and deadly. The wind cut through my sweatpants like knives. I looked down at the lump in my jacket. Leo had stopped crying, lulled by the motion and the sudden change in temperature. Or maybe he was just sensing my fear. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered, my teeth chattering. "Daddy's got you. Daddy's got a plan." But as I stepped off the porch and into the ankle-deep snow, I realized I was lying. I didn't have a plan. I had a credit card, a laptop, and a baby. And the nearest hotel was 5 miles away. I started walking. The cold wasn't just a temperature. It was a predator. It hunted for any exposed skin. My ears, my nose, my fingers clutching the laptop bag. The wind whipped down the suburban street, turning the snow into horizontal needles that stung my eyes. I walked. I had to keep moving. If I stopped, the heat I was generating for Leo would dissipate. I could feel his small body against my chest, a radiating furnace of life. He was the only thing keeping me going. Every step was a battle. My sneakers were soaked within minutes, my toes going numb. Inheritance. The word floated through my mind. My parents were obsessed with it. They were always talking about what they would leave Ethan, or what they expected to get from their own parents. They didn't know that Sarah had left Leo a trust fund that would secure his future, or that my own investments had secured mine. But money couldn't buy warmth in the middle of a deserted street at midnight. I made it 3 blocks before my legs started to tremble uncontrollably. The adrenaline from the confrontation was wearing off, replaced by the crushing reality of hypothermia. I saw a street lamp flickering ahead, casting a pool of sickly yellow light on the curb. Couldn't go on. Not like this. I needed to regroup. I needed to call a ride, but my fingers were too frozen to work the touchscreen of my phone. I collapsed onto the curb, sitting directly in the snow. I curled my body around Leo, creating a human shield against the wind. I buried my face in the opening of my coat, breathing warm air onto his sleeping face. "I'm sorry," I sobbed. The tears froze on my cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Leo. I thought they would change." I felt like the biggest failure in the world. A man with millions in assets, sitting in a snowbank, unable to protect his son from the winter because he wanted to prove a point to people who didn't care. Then I saw lights. Twin beams of white light cut through the falling snow. An engine purred. A low, powerful rumble that sounded nothing like the straining sedans of the neighborhood. The vehicle moved slowly, prowling the street like a shark. It was a black car. Huge. Imposing. It slowed down as it approached me. I tensed up. Was it the police? Was it someone dangerous? At this point, I didn't care. If it was a robber, I'd give them the laptop. I just needed heat. The car came to a smooth stop right in front of me. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. The spirit of ecstasy hood ornament gleamed under the street lamp, defiant against the storm. I stared at it, hallucinating. What was a car like this doing in a middle-class suburb at midnight on a Tuesday? The rear window rolled down with a silent, electronic hum. A face appeared. An older man, with silver hair combed back perfectly, deep-set eyes, and a jawline that had softened with age but still held authority. He was wearing a tuxedo with the tie undone, looking like he had just left a gala. I knew that face. I had seen it on magazine covers. I had seen it on video calls. I had seen it in the framed portrait hanging in the lobby of the building where my parents worked. It was Arthur Sterling, the CEO and owner of Sterling Enterprises, my parents' boss, and, unbeknownst to them, my biggest client. He squinted into the dark, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. When his gaze landed on me, his eyes went wide. "Mason?" he asked. His voice was rough, shocked. "Mason, is that you?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, shivering violently. "Good God, man," he swore. He didn't wait for a chauffeur. He threw the door open himself and stepped out into the snow in his dress shoes. "What are you doing? You told me you were in Aspen. You sent me the report from the cabin." He rushed over, grabbing my arm. His grip was warm, solid. I lied. I stammered, my teeth clicking together. He looked at the bulge in my jacket. He saw the tiny knit cap on Leo's head. His expression shifted from confusion to horror. "Is that the baby? Is that Leo?" "Yes," I wheezed. "Get in the car," Sterling commanded. It wasn't an offer. It was an order from a man used to being obeyed by thousands. Now, get in. He practically dragged me into the back seat of the Rolls-Royce. The interior was another world. It smelled of rich leather and expensive mahogany. The heat was on, enveloping me in a soft, dry warmth that made my skin prickle. Sterling climbed in beside me and slammed the door. "Driver, home. Fast. And turn the heat up to max." "Yes, Mr. Sterling," the driver replied, and the massive car surged forward, gaining traction on the ice where other cars would have slipped. Sterling turned to me. He pulled a cashmere blanket from a compartment and threw it over my shoulders. "Talk to me, Mason," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Why is my senior strategic advisor, the man who saved my company from bankruptcy 2 years ago, sitting in a snowbank like a vagrant?" I looked at him. Mr. Sterling knew me as the brilliant consultant who worked remotely. He knew I had lost my wife. He knew I was private. But he didn't know who my parents were. I had kept that separation intentional. I didn't want conflict of interest. I didn't want my parents riding my coattails. "My parents," I whispered. "I was staying with them. I wanted Leo to know his grandparents." "Your parents?" Sterling frowned. "Do I know them?" "Richard and Patricia," I said. "They work in accounts receivable and HR. Middle management." Sterling's face went blank for a second as he accessed his mental database. "Richard, the loud one, keeps asking for raises he hasn't earned? And Patricia, the woman who runs the office charity drive but never donates." "That's them," I said. "They live here." Sterling gestured to the passing neighborhood. "Yes, that was their house back there." "And why were you on the curb?" I took a deep breath, the warmth finally reaching my lungs. "They threw me out. Tonight. Because Ethan wanted my room for his video game streaming. They said." I choked up, the memory of the words stinging more than the frostbite. "They said to go live in the trash where I belong." There was a silence in the car. A heavy, suffocating silence. I watched Arthur Sterling's face. I had seen him negotiate billion-dollar mergers. I had seen him fire incompetent boards of directors. But I had never seen him look like this. His face turned a shade of red that was terrifying. His hands, resting on his knees, curled into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. "They did what?" he whispered. "They kicked us out. In the snow. They called Leo a noisy burden." Sterling reached out and touched the top of Leo's head, stroking the wool hat gently. His hand was trembling with rage. "They threw out a newborn," Sterling said, his voice rising. "My employees, people who represent my company. They threw a grieving father and a newborn baby into a blizzard." He looked at me, his eyes burning. "Mason, why didn't you tell them? Why didn't you tell them you own 5% of the company stock? Why didn't you tell them you outrank their division heads?" "I wanted a family, Arthur," I said, using his first name for the first time in person. "I didn't want them to love my wallet. I wanted them to love me. I wanted them to love Leo." "And you got your answer," Sterling said grimly. "Yes, I got my answer." Sterling pulled out his phone. It was a sleek, black device. He hit a speed dial number. "Lucas," he barked into the phone. Lucas was the head of corporate security. "Wake up. I need a full personnel file review on Richard and Patricia. Last name." He looked at me. "Miller," I supplied. "Richard and Patricia Miller. And get legal on the line. I don't care what time it is. Wake them up." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "No, Lucas. Not a promotion. I want a termination strategy ready by 8 a.m. And find out if they live in company-subsidized housing. I seem to recall we bought a block of homes in that district in the 90s for mid-level retention." He listened again, his eyes locking with mine. A cruel smile touched his lips. "They do? Excellent. Pull the contract. Clause 4B. The Code of Conduct, Eviction Clause. Print it out. I'm delivering it personally." He hung up the phone and looked at me. The anger in his eyes softened into a fierce protectiveness. "You're staying with me tonight, Mason. You and Leo. And tomorrow. He leaned back, the leather creaking. Tomorrow we are going to pay a visit to Richard and Patricia. And we are going to teach them the true definition of trash. The car sped through the night, carrying me away from my past and toward a reckoning I hadn't planned, but now desperately wanted. The Sterling estate was less of a house and more of a fortress of solitude. Iron gates swung open silently as the phantom approached, revealing a driveway that wound through snow-covered pines. When we pulled up to the main entrance, the house was already awake. Arthur must have texted ahead. Staff were waiting, not the stiff, formal butlers you see in movies, but a team of warm, concerned people. A housekeeper rushed forward with heated towels as soon as I stepped out of the car. "Mr. Sterling called ahead," she said gently, ushering me inside. "We have the nursery set up in the east wing. It was for his grandchildren, but it's fully stocked." I was overwhelmed. "Thank you. I need to check Leo." A man in a suit with a medical bag was waiting in the foyer. "I'm Dr. Evans," he said. "Mr. Sterling's private physician. Let's take a look at the little one." For the next hour I was in a daze. Dr. Evans checked Leo's temperature, his lungs, his extremities. "He's cold, but he's tough," Dr. Evans said, smiling as he listened to Leo's heartbeat. "No frostbite. You kept him warm enough, Mason. You did a good job. He's going to be fine." I collapsed into a chair, the relief washing over me so hard I almost vomited. He was okay. I hadn't failed him. Once Leo was fed and sleeping in a crib that cost more than my parents' car, I went down to the library. Arthur Sterling was there, sitting by a roaring fire. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. "Aged scotch," he said, handing me a glass. "You look like you need it." I took a sip. It burned, then soothed. "Thank you, Arthur, for everything. You didn't have to stop." "I didn't stop for a stranger," he said, sitting opposite me. "I stopped because I saw a human being in distress. The fact that it was you, Mason, that's divine intervention. Or karma, whichever you believe in." He pointed to my laptop bag, which I had placed on the table. "You said in the car that you have things to show me. About the company. About your parents." I nodded. The anger was returning now, sharp and focused. I opened the laptop. It booted up instantly. I was a strategic advisor, which meant I had access to data. Lots of data. I didn't just stay with them to bond, I admitted. I started noticing things. Letters from the company. Invoices on the kitchen counter. Things that didn't add up with their salary bracket. I turned the screen toward Arthur. Richard is in accounts receivable. Patricia is in HR. Between the two of them, they figured out a loophole in the vendor payment system. Arthur put on his reading glasses, his face tightening. He scrolled through the spreadsheet I had compiled. "They created a dummy vendor," I explained. "EM Consulting. Initials for Ethan Miller. My brother," I added. Arthur read the numbers. $5,000 here, $2,000 there. Over 3 years. This totals nearly $200,000. "It's how they bought Ethan his car," I said. "It's how they pay for his streaming equipment. It's how they afford the vacations they brag about." Arthur looked up, his face pale with fury. "Embezzlement. Plain and simple. And they used HR to cover the paper trail." "There's more," I said. "Look at the housing file." He clicked the next tab. "They live in corporate housing," I said. I checked the deed. Sterling Enterprises owns the property. They pay a subsidized rent of $500 a month. But look at the occupancy clause. Arthur read it aloud. Tenant agrees to maintain the property in good standing and adhere to the Sterling Moral Code of Conduct. Any illegal activity or behavior that brings disrepute to the company is grounds for immediate lease termination and eviction. Is throwing a baby into a snowstorm a breach of the moral code? I asked. Arthur closed the laptop. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. It is a breach of humanity, Mason. But legally, yes. Coupled with the embezzlement, they are finished. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the storm. I hired your father 20 years ago, he said softly. He was a hard-working man then, or so I thought. I've watched him become arrogant. I've watched him bully interns. I let it slide because he hit his targets. But this, he turned back to me. Tomorrow isn't just about firing them, Mason. It's about setting a precedent. I want you there. I want you to be the one to hand them the letter. I can't, I said, looking down at my hands. I'm not vindictive. It's not vengeance, Arthur corrected. It's justice. Think of Leo. Think of what they would have done if I hadn't driven by. They left him to die, Mason. If the temperature had dropped another 5 degrees, if you had fallen asleep. He let the sentence hang there. He was right. They hadn't just kicked me out. They had endangered my son's life. And they had done it while stealing from the very man who was saving us. Okay, I said, looking up. I'll do it. But I want one thing. Anything. I want to make sure Ethan goes down too. He's the reason they did it. He's the beneficiary of the stolen money. Oh, don't worry. Arthur smiled, a cold, shark-like smile. I've already texted the district attorney. He owes me a favor. By the time we leave this house tomorrow, there will be a warrant. He finished his drink. Go get some sleep, Mason. You have a big day tomorrow. You're getting a promotion. I am. Yes, Arthur said. Starting tomorrow, you are no longer remote consultant. You are the new vice president of operations. And your first official act will be cleaning house. I went upstairs to the nursery. I lay down on the daybed next to Leo's crib. I watched his chest rise and fall. I thought about my mother's voice. Trash. I thought about my father's shove. I thought about Ethan's smirk. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since Sarah died, I didn't feel helpless. I felt dangerous. The sun rose bright and blinding on the snow the next morning. It was the kind of deceptive, beautiful winter day where the sky is blue but the air can freeze your lungs. I was awake at 6 a.m. I showered in a bathroom that was larger than my old bedroom. I shaved. I put on the suit Arthur had his tailor bringing over, a bespoke charcoal gray Italian suit that fit like armor. Downstairs, Arthur was waiting. Ready. Ready. We got into the Phantom. Lucas, the head of security, was in the front seat. He nodded to me. We have the paperwork, sir. And the police are on standby 2 blocks away. As we drove toward my parents' neighborhood, I pulled up the security camera feed from my old room on my phone. I had installed a hidden cam a week ago to monitor the nanny cam I used for Leo, just in case. They hadn't found it. I watched the feed. It was audio and video. Turn the volume up, Arthur said, leaning in. We listened to the morning routine of the Miller household. It was sickeningly cheerful. Did you sleep well, honey? My mother asked. Like a baby? Ethan laughed. Better, actually, since the actual baby is gone. God, it's so quiet. I love it. I told you, my father said. You have to be firm. Mason was dragging us down. He was bad energy. Do you think he found a hotel? My mother asked, flipping pancakes. Who cares? Ethan said with his mouth full. He's got a credit card. He'll be fine. Or he'll go crying to a shelter. Either way, not our problem. I felt Arthur stiffen beside me. Monsters, he muttered. Then the phone in the video rang. It was the house landline. My father picked it up. Hello? Yes, this is Richard Miller. Pause. Mr. Sterling's office? The CEO? My father's face went white, then red with excitement. He covered the receiver and hissed at the others. It's the CEO's executive assistant. Shut up. He went back to the phone. Yes, of course. He's coming here, personally, to discuss a structural change in the department? Oh my God. Yes. We are home. We are honored. He hung up, trembling. What is it? My mother shrieked. Mr. Sterling is coming here, Richard gasped. In an hour. He said he wants to discuss a structural change. Patricia, you know what that means. Promotion, she screamed. They're finally making you director. Or maybe they're promoting both of us. And he's coming personally, Richard said, pacing. That means it's big. Maybe he wants to see our lifestyle. Make sure we're management material. The house, Patricia yelled. Look at this place. It's a mess. Ethan, clean up your plates. Richard, put on a tie. Oh my God. The guest room. What about it? It smells like sour milk and diaper cream. We need to air it out. Make it look like an office. Or a library. Make it look sophisticated. I watched on the screen as they scrambled. It was a pathetic ballet of greed. They were scrubbing surfaces, hiding dirty laundry, and spraying air freshener like it was holy water. Ethan was excited too. Dad, if you get promoted, you can buy me that new mixer for my soundboard, right? And maybe co-sign on the Benz. If I get director, Richard beamed, adjusting his tie in the mirror. I'll buy you 2 Benzes. We've made it, son. We've finally made it. Cutting the deadweight mason must have changed our luck. It's a sign from the universe. A sign from the universe, Arthur repeated in the car, shaking his head. They have no idea. They think they're being rewarded for getting rid of me, I said. They think my bad luck was holding them back. They're about to learn that you were the only thing protecting them, Lucas said from the front seat. We were turning onto the street now. I saw the neighbors peering out of their windows. A Rolls-Royce in this neighborhood was an event. Mrs. Higgins, the nosy neighbor from next door, was already on her porch in her bathrobe, watching. Stop here, Arthur told the driver. We were 2 houses down. Let them sweat for a minute. We watched. The front door of my parents' house opened. Richard and Patricia stepped out. They were dressed in their Sunday best. Richard was wearing a suit that was a size too small. Patricia had on her pearls. Even Ethan was wearing a collared shirt, though he hadn't tucked it in. They stood on the porch, shivering in the cold, forcing smiles onto their faces. They looked like desperate salespeople waiting for a whale client. Look at them, I said. They look so proud. Pride before the fall, Arthur quoted. He turned to me. Here is the plan. I go first. I lull them into a false sense of security. Then, you come out. With Leo. With Leo. He's the evidence. He's the victim. And he's the future. Arthur checked his watch. It's time. Lucas, give the signal to the police unit. Tell them to move in on my mark. The driver eased the car forward. The gravel crunched under the massive tires. We rolled up to the driveway slowly, majestically. I saw my father straighten up, sucking in his gut. I saw my mother wave a frantic, manic wave. Ethan gave a thumbs up. They had no idea that inside the tinted windows, the son they had discarded was sitting next to the man they worshipped, holding the power to destroy their entire world. The car stopped. The engine cut. Silence. My heart was pounding against my ribs. Not from fear this time, but from anticipation. This was it. The payoff. Showtime, Arthur said. The driver walked around and opened the rear door on Arthur's side. Arthur Sterling stepped out. The cold air didn't seem to bother him. He stood tall, radiating authority. Mr. Sterling, my father cried out, practically running down the porch steps. He extended both hands for a handshake. What an honor. Welcome to our humble home. Arthur didn't take the hand. He simply looked at it until my father, embarrassed, slowly lowered it. Richard, Arthur said. His voice was neutral, unreadable. And Patricia. Welcome, sir, my mother chirped, bobbing a clumsy curtsy. Please come inside. We have coffee, fresh pastries. I prefer to stay outside, Arthur said, cutting her off. He looked around the yard. The air is crisp. It reminds me of last night. My parents exchanged a confused look, but they kept their smiles plastered on. Yes, very fresh, Richard agreed. So, sir, to what do we owe this incredible visit? The assistant mentioned a structural change. Indeed, Arthur said. He clasped his hands behind his back. I've been reviewing the company's assets and its liabilities. I found some discrepancies that needed immediate executive attention. Liabilities, Ethan piped up from the porch. Like bad employees? You should fire them all. Dad always says you have to trim the fat. Arthur turned his gaze to Ethan. Who is this? This is our son. Ethan? Patricia said proudly, pushing him forward. He's a digital creator. Very talented. He has… How many followers, honey? 1,200, Ethan said, puffing out his chest. I'm an influencer. Impressive, Arthur said dryly. And where is your other son? The air left the yard instantly. My parents froze. Other son, Richard stammered. Oh, you mean Mason? He doesn't live here anymore. Really? Arthur asked. Since when? Since recently, Patricia said quickly. He decided to move on. He's independent. We believe in tough love, sir. Teaching them to stand on their own 2 feet. Tough love, Arthur repeated. Is that what you call it when you throw a man and a newborn baby into a blizzard at midnight? The color drained from their faces so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. Sir, Richard squeaked. I don't know who told you that. I heard he was begging, Arthur continued, stepping closer. I heard the baby was screaming. I heard you told him to go live in the trash. That's a lie, Ethan shouted. He's lying. Mason is a liar. Is he? Arthur turned back to the car. He tapped the roof twice. The driver opened my door. I stepped out. I was wearing the charcoal Italian suit. My hair was groomed, and in my arms, wrapped in a blanket of cashmere that cost more than their furniture, was Leo. I stood next to Arthur Sterling, matching his stance. My parents looked at me like they were seeing a ghost. Their mouths hung open. Richard actually took a step back and stumbled on the walkway. Mason? My mother whispered. What are you doing in Mr. Sterling's car? He's not just in my car, Arthur said, his voice booming now so the neighbors could hear. He's in my inner circle. Arthur put a hand on my shoulder. Richard, Patricia, I'd like to introduce you to the man who saved Sterling Enterprises from the '08 crisis strategies. The man who has been my silent senior advisor for 5 years. And as of this morning, the new vice president of operations. Vice President, Richard whispered. He looked at me, his eyes bulging. But you're broke. You asked for a room. I didn't ask for money, I said, my voice steady and cold. I asked for family. I wanted to see if you cared about me or my success. I got my answer. Mason, wait, my mother said, stepping forward, her hands trembling. A fake, desperate smile started to form on her lips. Baby, we didn't mean it. You know how stress is. We were just motivating you. We love you. We love Leo. Let me hold him. She reached out her arms. I stepped back. Don't touch him. You lost the right to hold him when you threw him in the snow, I said. Mason, please. My father pleaded, looking from me to Arthur. Mr. Sterling, this is a family misunderstanding. We can work this out. We are loyal employees. Loyal? Arthur laughed. It was a harsh sound. He snapped his fingers. Lucas stepped forward and handed him a thick red envelope. Arthur handed it to me. Do the honors, Mr. Vice President. I took the envelope. I walked up to my father. He looked small now, pathetic. Richard Miller, Patricia Miller, I said formally. On behalf of Sterling Enterprises, you are hereby terminated for cause, effective immediately. Fired, Richard gasped. You can't. I have tenure. What cause? Embezzlement, I said. We know about the EM Consulting account. We know about the fake invoices. We have the logs. Ethan made a noise like a dying animal. Wait. That money. They said it was a bonus. And I continued, ignoring him. Violation of the moral code of conduct regarding company housing. Company housing? Patricia looked around wildly. This is our house. No, I said. Read your lease. This is Sterling property. And you just violated the eviction clause. So, Arthur interrupted, stepping up beside me. You're fired. You're under investigation for fraud. And He looked at his watch. You have exactly 1 hour to vacate the premises before the locks are changed. 1 hour? My mother screamed. Where will we go? I looked her dead in the eye. I leaned in close, so she could see the reflection of her own fear in my pupils. Go live in the trash, I whispered. Where you belong. The silence that followed my words was shattered by the sound of sirens. 2 police cruisers pulled up behind the Rolls-Royce, lights flashing but sirens cut short. The neighbors were now standing on their lawns, phones out, recording everything. My father looked at the police, then at me. Mason, stop this. Please. Not the police. Think of the reputation. You should have thought of that before you stole $200,000. I said. Officers Miller, no relation, and Kowalski walked up the driveway. Lucas met them and handed them a file. Ethan Miller? Officer Miller asked, looking at my brother. Ethan tried to run back into the house, but he tripped over his own feet. I didn't do anything. It was them. They gave me the money. We have evidence that you knowingly cashed fraudulent checks and conspired to defraud Sterling Enterprises, the officer said, pulling out handcuffs. Mom, Dad, do something. Ethan screamed as they cuffed him. My parents did nothing. They were too busy trying to save themselves. Officer, he's an adult, my mother cried. We didn't know what he was doing with the money. We just signed the checks. That's not what the audit says, Patricia, I said calmly. I saw the emails. You set up the account. You taught him how to invoice. They dragged Ethan to the squad car. He was weeping, snot running down his face, begging for his followers to save him. Now for the house, Arthur said. He signaled to a van that had just pulled up. A crew of movers in Sterling uniforms jumped out. This is a pack-and-store eviction, Arthur explained to my parents. They will pack your personal items. Anything bought with company funds stays. That includes the electronics, the furniture in the den, and that car. He pointed to the Mercedes in the driveway. Not the car, Richard wailed. I just paid it off. With stolen money, I reminded him. Lucas, the keys. Lucas held out his hand. My father, shaking like a leaf, dug into his pocket and dropped the keys into Lucas's palm. You can't do this, my mother sobbed, sitting down on the porch steps, exactly where she had stood when she kicked me out. We're family, Mason. Doesn't that mean anything? I looked down at Leo. He was awake now, looking around with wide, curious eyes. Yes, I said. It means everything. That's why I'm protecting my family. I kissed Leo's forehead. My real family. You have 45 minutes left, I told them. I suggest you grab your coats. It's cold out here. I turned my back on them. It was the most satisfying feeling of my life. I walked back to the Rolls-Royce. Mrs. Higgins from next door called out, Good for you, Mason. I saw what they did last night. Disgraceful. I waved at her. My parents shrank under the gaze of the neighborhood. Their carefully constructed image of the perfect suburban family was crumbling into dust. I got into the car. Arthur sat beside me. How does it feel? He asked. I watched through the window as the movers carried out boxes. I watched my father arguing with a policeman. I watched my mother weeping into her hands, ignored by her husband and son. I thought I would feel happy, I said honestly. But mostly, I just feel safe. For the first time in forever, I feel safe. That's the best feeling in the world, Arthur said. What happens to them now? I asked. They'll be prosecuted, Arthur said. They'll likely avoid jail time if they pay back the money, but they'll be bankrupt. They'll lose their pension. They'll have to start over. They're in their 60s, I said. Starting over will be hard. Not as hard as surviving a snowstorm with a newborn, Arthur pointed out. I nodded. He was right. Let's go, I said. I have a lot of work to do if I'm going to be VP. That's the spirit, Arthur smiled. As the Rolls-Royce pulled away, I didn't look back. I looked forward. I looked at my son. I looked at the laptop that held my future. I had walked into that house a beggar in their eyes. I was leaving as a king, But the story doesn't end here, because a year later I ran into them again. And what I saw then, well, that's a lesson in karma that even I wasn't prepared for. 6 months. That is a relatively short amount of time in the grand scheme of the universe, but in the life of a human being, it is long enough for empires to rise and for kingdoms to crumble into dust. My life had transformed in ways that defied the laws of probability. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The Vice President of Operations title on my office door wasn't just a placard. It was a testament to the fact that I had stopped apologizing for my own existence. I was working harder than ever, but for the first time, I wasn't working to prove my worth to people committed to misunderstanding me. I was working for Leo. Leo was crawling now. He was a force of nature, pulling himself up on furniture, babbling with a determination that reminded me of Sarah. Every time I looked at him, safe in the nursery I had built in my new home, a modest but beautiful estate just 10 minutes from Arthur's, I felt a surge of victory. He would never know the cold. He would never know what it felt like to be looked at as a burden. But as I rose, the Miller family fell. And their descent was not a graceful glide. It was a nosedive. I didn't seek out information about them. I didn't need to. In a town like ours, and in a company as large as Sterling Enterprises, gossip travels faster than light. Lucas, the head of security, would occasionally drop files on my desk. He didn't say a word, he just left them there. He knew I needed to know for safety, and perhaps for a sense of closure that still felt just out of reach. The legal hammer had come down with devastating precision. Richard and Patricia, terrified of prison time, had liquidated everything. The plea deal was brutal but fair. Full restitution of the embezzled funds in exchange for a suspended sentence. They sold the Mercedes. They drained their 401ks. They sold the jewelry. They were stripped of every status symbol they had hoarded to mask their mediocrity. Ethan didn't fare as well. The fraud charges against him stuck harder because he had a prior record of petty theft that my parents had paid to seal years ago. A seal that was broken during the investigation. He was serving 18 months in a minimum security facility. His influencer career imploded the moment the news broke. The internet, which he worshipped, turned on him with the ferocity of a starving pack of wolves. His comment sections, once filled with fake praise, were now a graveyard of mockery. One rainy Tuesday in November, I saw the reality of their new life with my own eyes. I was driving home from the office. I wasn't in the Rolls-Royce. I was driving my own car, a solid, safe SUV that I had bought with my first executive bonus. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the streets into rivers of gray sludge. I stopped at a red light in the industrial district, a part of town filled with warehouses and discount grocery stores. The kind of place my mother used to drive past and wrinkle her nose at, calling it unsavory. That's when I saw them. They were standing at a bus stop. There was no shelter, just a metal pole with a schedule tacked to it. My father, Richard, was holding a broken umbrella that was losing its battle against the wind. He looked 20 years older. His posture, once puffed up with unearned arrogance, was slumped and defeated. He was wearing a janitor's uniform peeking out from under a cheap plastic poncho. My mother stood next to him. The woman who wouldn't be caught dead without her pearls was wearing a faded coat that looked 2 sizes too big. She was holding 2 heavy plastic bags from the discount market. Her hair, usually dyed and sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was plastered to her skull, gray roots showing aggressively. They were arguing. I couldn't hear them through the glass and the rain, but I knew the rhythm of it. My father was gesturing with his free hand, blaming her. She was shaking her head, blaming him. It was the same toxic dance they had performed my whole life. Only now there was no audience, no money, and no scapegoat to absorb the blows. The light turned green. For a split second, a ghost of an old instinct flared up in my chest. The instinct of the dutiful son. Pull over, it whispered. Give them a ride. Give them money. Fix it. I looked at the empty car seat in the back, where Leo usually sat. I imagined pulling over. I imagined inviting that energy back into my car. I imagined my father's potential gratitude masking his resentment, and my mother's tears masking her manipulation. I gripped the steering wheel until my leather gloves creaked. Go live in the trash where you belong. The words echoed in my mind, not with pain anymore, but with clarity. They hadn't just thrown me out, they had discarded me. And in doing so, they had shown me exactly who they were. You cannot fix people who break you for sport. You cannot warm people who use you as firewood. I pressed the gas pedal. I drove past them. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, where the rain was clearing and the sky was beginning to brighten. That night, I had dinner with Arthur Sterling. We had developed a tradition of Tuesday night dinners. It wasn't business. It was family in the way family is supposed to be. We were sitting in his study, the fire crackling, the remnants of a roast chicken dinner on the table. Leo was asleep in the portable crib I brought over. I saw them today, I said, breaking the comfortable silence. Arthur didn't need to ask who. He swirled his wine, watching the red liquid coat the glass. And they looked small, I said. I thought I would feel triumphant or angry, but I just felt nothing. It was like looking at strangers. That is the final stage of grief, Arthur said softly. Indifference. It means you are free. He set his glass down and looked at me with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. Mason, there is something I have never told you. Something about that night. The night I found you. What about it? You asked me once why I was on that street, in that neighborhood, at midnight. I nodded. I assumed you were taking a shortcut to the airport or avoiding construction. No, Arthur said. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small, worn photograph. He slid it across the mahogany desk toward me. I picked it up. My breath caught in my throat. It was a picture of a young Arthur Sterling, looking dashing in his 30s, standing next to a man I didn't know. But the man was holding a baby girl, and that baby girl had eyes I would know anywhere. That's Sarah, I whispered. My wife. And the man holding her was Jonathan, my best friend, my business partner before Sterling Enterprises became what it is today. Arthur's eyes grew misty. Jonathan died when Sarah was 10. Her mother struggled. I tried to help, but they were proud. They refused charity. So I did what I could from the shadows. I set up the scholarship that got Sarah into law school. I watched her grow up from a distance. He looked at the fire. When Sarah died, it broke my heart, Mason. I felt like I had failed Jonathan. I promised myself I would keep an eye on her husband and her child. You. I stared at him, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with a deafening snap. You knew? You knew who I was when you hired me as a consultant. I knew you were Sarah's husband, Arthur admitted. But I didn't hire you because of that. I hired you because you were brilliant. I kept my distance because I wanted you to succeed on your own merits. I didn't want you to feel like a charity case. But that night, Arthur continued, his voice trembling slightly, I had a feeling. Call it intuition, call it a message from Jonathan. I just felt uneasy. I knew you were staying with the Millers. I knew their reputation at the office climbers superficial. I decided to drive by, just to check, just to see if the house looked peaceful. He looked at me, a tear tracking through the deep lines of his face. When I saw a figure sitting on the curb in the snow, my heart stopped. When I realized it was you holding Sarah's baby, Mason, I didn't just feel anger. I felt terror. I almost lost the last piece of my best friend. I sat there stunned. The universe felt suddenly smaller, tighter, and infinitely more designed. It wasn't luck. It wasn't just a random act of kindness from a billionaire CEO. It was a legacy of love. It was Sarah in some way sending protection. You saved us, I said, my voice thick with emotion. No, Arthur shook his head. We saved each other. You gave me a grandson to spoil. You gave me a son to be proud of. He stood up and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. The Millers, they are your biology, Mason, but they are not your history, and they are certainly not your future. You have built a fortress out of the stones they threw at you. Never forget that. I stood up and hugged him. It was the first time I had hugged a father figure in years. It wasn't stiff or performative. It was solid. It was real. Thank you, I whispered. Now, Arthur said, pulling back and clearing his throat, regaining his composure. I believe there is a bottle of 1982 vintage in the cellar. And since you saw the ghosts of your past today and didn't flinch, I think we should toast to the future. As we walked toward the cellar, I looked back at Leo sleeping. The circle was broken. The toxicity stopped with me. My son would grow up with a grandfather who adored him, a father who would die for him, and a story that would teach him the most important lesson of all. Family is not a noun. It is a verb. Spring came to our town slowly, then all at once. The gray sludge of winter melted away, revealing the stubborn green shoots of crocuses pushing through the thawed earth. It was a season of aggressive renewal, a reminder that no winter, no matter how harsh, lasts forever. On the first warm Saturday of April, I took Leo to the cemetery. It had been almost a year since Sarah passed. For the first few months, I couldn't bring myself to visit. The pain was too raw, the anger at the unfairness of it all too consuming. I felt that if I stood in front of her stone, I would crumble and never get back up. But today, I walked with a steady gait. I was carrying Leo in a carrier strapped to my chest, his little legs kicking excitedly as he watched the birds flit between the headstones. Sarah's grave was on a hill, overlooking the valley. It was a peaceful spot, under the shade of an old oak tree that was just starting to bud. I knelt down and brushed some dried leaves off the granite marker. Sarah Elizabeth Reynolds, beloved wife and mother. Hi, baby, I whispered. Leo cooed, reaching out a chubby hand toward the stone. We made it, I told her. We survived the winter. I sat on the grass, arranging a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite, in the vase. I began to talk to her, not in the desperate, pleading way I used to pray at night, but in a conversational rhythm. I told her about Leo's first tooth. I told her about the new project at Sterling Enterprises, a green energy initiative I was spearheading. And then, I told her about my parents. I fired them, Sarah, I said, plucking a blade of grass. I evicted them. I watched them lose everything. I paused, waiting for the guilt to come. Sarah was the kindest soul I had ever known. She was the one who always urged forgiveness, who always tried to see the broken child inside the angry adult. I wondered if she would be disappointed in me. The wind rustled the branches above me, a soft, sighing sound. I know you would have wanted me to forgive them, I continued. And in a way I have. I've forgiven them for being who they are. I've accepted it. But I couldn't let them stay, Sarah. I couldn't let them near him. I touched Leo's cheek. He smiled at me, a drooly, gummy smile that contained the whole world. They called him a burden, I told the stone. They threw him in the snow. I had to be the wall between him and the world. I had to be the bad guy to be the good father. I sat there for a long time, letting the sun warm my face. I realized then that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Forgiveness means cutting the anchor so the boat can sail. I hadn't slammed the door on my parents out of spite. I had locked it to keep the wolves out. As I sat there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it. It was an email from the lawyer handling the Reynolds Sterling Foundation. I had used a significant portion of my bonus and the returns from my private investments to start a nonprofit. It wasn't a charity for handouts. It was a rapid response network for victims of domestic displacement. We provided emergency housing, legal counsel, and career rehabilitation for single parents and young adults kicked out by their families. The email was a weekly report. 3 families housed this week. 2 legal victories against abusive guardians. 1 scholarship granted. I smiled. My parents had told me to live in the trash. Instead, I had built a recycling plant. I was taking the trash of society, the rejected, the abandoned, the unwanted, and helping them see that they were actually treasure. We're building something good, Sarah, I said, standing up. My knees cracked a little. I wasn't the young kid I used to be. We're making sure no one else has to sit on a curb in a snowstorm waiting for a Rolls-Royce. We're sending the cars to them. I picked up the diaper bag. I looked at the grave one last time. I miss you, I said. The ache in my chest familiar but manageable now. I miss you every day. But we're okay. We're going to be okay. I turned to walk back to the car. As I reached the bottom of the hill, I saw a familiar black car parked next to my SUV. Arthur was leaning against the hood, wearing casual clothes, a sweater and slacks. He was holding a pinwheel. He walked over and handed the pinwheel to Leo. Leo grasped it instantly, delighted as the wind spun the colorful plastic blades. I thought you might need backup, Arthur said, looking up the hill toward Sarah's grave. She was a wonderful woman, Mason. She was, I agreed. She would be proud of you, Arthur said. And she would be relieved. Relieved that you finally learned the difference between loyalty and servitude, Arthur said. You served your parents for years, hoping for love. You were a servant in your own life. Now you are loyal to those who deserve it. To Leo, to yourself, to the memory of Sarah. He opened the door of his car. Coming for lunch? Mrs. Gable made that pot roast you like. We'll follow you, I said. I strapped Leo into his car seat in my SUV. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine. I looked at the cemetery in the rearview mirror, then I looked at the black Rolls-Royce pulling out ahead of me, leading the way home. I thought about the word inheritance one last time. My parents had spent their lives waiting for an inheritance of money, thinking it would fix their souls. They died 1,000 spiritual deaths waiting for a payout that never came. I had realized that the true inheritance wasn't what you were given when someone died. It was what you built while you were alive. It was the resilience you forged in the fire. It was the family you chose when the one you were born into failed you. I put the car in drive. The road ahead was clear. The snow was gone. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for a place to belong. I had built one. Looking back on that night in the snow, I realized the most dangerous lie I ever told myself was that I could love my parents into changing. I thought if I was just successful enough, quiet enough, or helpful enough, they would finally see me. But here is the hard truth I want you to take away from my story. You cannot drink poison just because you are thirsty. My parents were poison. They were toxic not because they were flawed, but because they refused to see the value in anything they couldn't exploit. By cutting them off, I didn't destroy my family. I saved it. I saved Leo from growing up thinking love is conditional. I saved myself from a lifetime of begging for scraps at a table where I brought all the food. Setting boundaries isn't an act of war. It's an act of self-respect. If you are holding on to a relationship, whether it's parents, a partner, or a friend, that makes you feel small, that makes you feel like trash, please take this as your sign. Stop waiting for the Rolls-Royce to pull up. Be your own rescue. Walk away. It will be cold at first, but I promise you, the warmth you find on the other side is worth every step. We've been through a lot together in this story. If you've made it this far, you are the real MVP. I want to know, what is the one toxic thing or person you need to cut out of your life to find your own peace? Or, if this story gave you hope, just comment the word good below. Let's fill the comments with positivity and strength. Seeing your good lets me know that sharing my pain wasn't in vain and that we are building a community of survivors right here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of our journey. Stay strong, everyone.